There's a strange paradox no one wants to admit. The older a man gets, the more invisible he becomes. You're no longer the competitor with raw ambition, no longer the young man admired for his looks or energy. In a world obsessed with youth, aging quietly pushes you to the sidelines. But here's the truth most men miss. Aging doesn't make you weaker. In fact, it can make you unstoppable, if you know how to carry it. Because at this stage, power comes from presence, attraction comes from calm, and respect? It's earned not through noise, but through depth. As Epictetus said, don't seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens, and you'll be happy. That's the mindset of a true green flag man, the kind of man younger people gravitate toward, not out of obligation, but admiration. In this video, you'll discover 5 powerful signs that you're becoming that kind of man. Each one is rooted in emotional mastery, self-respect, and purpose. And the last one? It's the difference between aging and becoming irrelevant, or aging and becoming unforgettable. If that's the kind of man you want to be, hit subscribe and drop your age in the comments. Let's redefine what growing older really means. Trait number 1. You become a mentor, not a complainer. They say with age comes wisdom, but for many men, age only brings volume. Louder complaints, longer rants, endless stories about how things used to be. That's not wisdom. That's ego dressed in nostalgia. A man becomes a true green flag, not when he demands respect, but when he deserves it. And the difference is this. He mentors, he doesn't complain. Think about it. The men who walk into a room and get quiet admiration, they don't talk about the good old days. They ask what the younger generation is building. They offer perspective, not judgment. In a culture obsessed with relevance and youth, the real power move is to guide quietly, to know when to speak, and more importantly, when to listen. Because modern masculinity isn't about dominance. It's about transmission. Seneca wrote, "While we teach, we learn." A real mentor understands that wisdom is a two-way street. He offers guidance, but remains humble enough to receive it too. Let me give you a real example. I was once at a startup networking event. Most of the room was under 35. There was one older man, gray beard, no business cards, no sales pitch, just presence. I noticed something. Young founders kept walking up to him, not because he was loud, but because when he spoke, it was like time slowed. At one point, a guy asked him about hiring mistakes, and he didn't give a lecture. He told a story, one mistake, one lesson, no ego. And the room leaned in. What did I see in that moment? Not just respect, gravitas. That rare weight behind a man's words. And it wasn't about power. It was about relevance earned over time. See, that's what young men crave but rarely find. A man who remembers, not to boast, but to teach. And who teaches, not to control, but to serve. So, here's the challenge. If you're over 50 and your stories always begin with "back in my day," it might be time to rewrite your script. Because no one's inspired by complaints. They're inspired by clarity and calm and quiet strength. And if younger men don't seek you out, maybe it's not because they're lost. Maybe it's because you've stopped showing them the way. But everything we've just explored about mentorship means nothing if you miss what comes next. Because trait number 2 is the quiet force that makes people trust you without words. And most men lose it as they age without even noticing. Let's talk about that. Trait number 2, you radiate calm when everything else is chaos. Most men get more irritable as they get older. Short fuse, quick temper, loud opinions. And they justify it by saying, "I've earned the right to speak my mind." But here's the uncomfortable truth. Yelling doesn't make you wise. And age alone doesn't make you a leader. What truly separates a green flag man from the crowd is this. He becomes calmer, not louder. Stoic, not reactive. Still, not soft. When the world goes into panic mode, he becomes the still point in the turning storm. It's not because his life is easier. In fact, it's usually the opposite. Health issues, career setbacks, loss of people he's loved. He's lived through enough chaos to know that reacting emotionally only makes things worse. And that's what makes him trustworthy. When everything around you is screaming, his presence says, "We'll figure this out. You're not alone." Epictetus said it best, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And this reaction, this inner stability, isn't something you fake. It's something you forge through years of trial, pain, failure, and reflection. Let me tell you a moment I'll never forget. A few years ago, I was stuck at a crowded airport. Flight delays, cancellations, people yelling at gate agents, total chaos. I looked around, and everyone was on edge. Everyone except one man. Mid-60s. Tan leather bag. Wore a dark sweater, like he wasn't trying to impress anyone. But here's what got me. His posture never slouched. He wasn't buried in his phone. He wasn't complaining. He just sat, shoulders relaxed, hands folded, eyes quietly observing. Then something happened. A young woman nearby started crying after getting bumped from her connecting flight. She didn't ask for help. But that man stood up, walked over calmly, and simply asked, "Want to talk this through?" Not dramatic. Not intrusive. Just grounded. 10 minutes later, she wasn't crying anymore. That wasn't kindness alone. That was emotional authority. See, people instinctively lean on the calmest energy in the room, especially when things fall apart. That's why this trait matters more than most men realize. Because calmness isn't the absence of emotion. It's the discipline to hold space for others when they can't hold it for themselves. Most men in their 50s, 60s, even 70s become emotionally rigid. Or worse, emotionally entitled. They think age gives them the right to lash out, to stop listening, to lose control, and expect others to tolerate it. That's not masculinity. That's regression. But the green flag man? He's dangerous in the right way. Not because he explodes, but because he never needs to. He doesn't panic in arguments. He doesn't yell in traffic. He doesn't let frustration make decisions for him. That's power. That's the man women trust. That's the man younger men look to. Not for answers, but for presence. So if people describe you as their rock, if your grandkids crawl into your lap because they feel safe, not because they're told to, if friends call you first when something goes wrong, you're already living this trait. And if not, it's never too late to build it. In fact, the older you are, the more valuable this trait becomes, because time has trained your nervous system. And you either use that to project calm, or you waste it, becoming bitter and loud. So ask yourself honestly, when things go wrong, are you the calm, or are you the chaos? Because what's coming next will test this trait directly. Trait number 3 is the most surprising of them all, and without it, the rest fall apart quietly. Ready? Let's go deeper. Trait number 3. You choose curiosity over certainty. Here's a brutal truth most older men won't admit. Certainty can kill you. Not your body, but your spirit. The moment you start thinking, "I've seen it all. I've learned enough. I know how the world works," that's the moment you stop growing. And a man who stops growing doesn't just get old, he starts decaying. Slowly. Silently. From the inside out. That's why this next trait is rare and powerful. A true green flag man stays curious, especially when it's easier to be rigid. He doesn't act like he has all the answers. He doesn't need to prove himself in every conversation. He listens. He reads. He asks questions. Not because he's confused, but because he's awake. Seneca once said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." And that's not a slogan. That's a survival code. Because the older you get, the more tempting it is to sink into what you already know. Familiar routines. Familiar opinions. Familiar worldviews. But that's not wisdom. That's just comfort dressed up in pride. Let me paint a picture for you. I was sitting in a coffee shop a few months ago, prepping notes for a speech. 2 men were at the table next to me, one probably in his late 30s, the other easily in his 70s. The younger guy was showing him how to use a new design tool on his iPad. You could tell it was completely new to the older man. But instead of waving it off or saying, "That's too much for me," he leaned in. He didn't pretend to understand everything, but he asked sharp questions. He took notes. And this is the part that stuck with me. Every few minutes he'd smile and say, "Damn, I love learning stuff like this." No defensiveness. No ego. Just excitement. That's green flag energy. See, curiosity keeps your mind elastic. It keeps your conversations interesting. It keeps your soul alive. And it sends a loud signal, without saying a word, that you are still becoming. That your best years aren't behind you. That your mind is open, not closed. Contrast that with the typical red flag man in his later years. He resents technology. Dismisses younger generations. Thinks new music is trash. Thinks the internet ruined everything. And behind all that noise? Fear. Fear of being irrelevant. Fear of not understanding. Fear of change. But instead of facing that fear, he masks it with arrogance. That's not strength. That's just stuck. But a green flag man? He stays humble. Not because he doubts himself, but because he knows the world is too vast to ever master. He learns a new language, tries a new sport, listens to ideas that challenge him, reads books that make him uncomfortable, not because he has to, but because he chooses to stretch. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more curious he becomes, the younger he seems. Not in looks, in energy, in presence, in how people feel around him. So if you're the kind of man who still asks why, who's not afraid to say, I don't know, but I'd love to find out, who still marks your calendar with new experiences instead of just appointments, then you're not just aging. You're evolving. And that's unforgettable. But here's the twist. Curiosity alone won't save you if you don't know how to carry it. Because the way you move through the world, the way you show up physically, especially as an older man, tells a story long before you speak a word. And most men get it completely wrong. Trait number 4 reveals the one thing about your presence that either attracts respect or kills it before you open your mouth. Let's talk about that next. Trait number 4. You master presence, not performance. Most older men make a fatal mistake without realizing it. As they age, they start trying harder to impress, instead of learning how to express presence. They focus on performance, the clothes, the posture, the voice, the handshake, all rehearsed, all hollow. What they don't understand is that high-value presence isn't about doing more. It's about needing less. In fact, the strongest man in the room is almost never the loudest. He's the one who doesn't flinch in silence. He doesn't fidget when he's not the center of attention. He's comfortable taking up space, without performing for it. Presence is the calm gravity that draws people in without a single word. And that's why this green flag trait is so magnetic. Because a man who's mastered his presence communicates everything women and younger men are silently searching for: safety, emotional steadiness, quiet power. He doesn't need to prove who he is. You can feel it the second he walks in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In today's world, the enemy is noise. Men performing, men chasing, men compensating. Presence is your quiet rebellion. Let me give you a real-life example. I once met a retired Navy officer, mid-60s, salt and pepper beard, dark denim jacket, quiet demeanor. We were at a casual rooftop event in the city. People were mingling, small-talking, laughing too loud. But this man, he just stood there, drink in hand, observing, saying little. No tension in his body. No awkward glancing at his phone. Just still. Anchored. And I noticed something fascinating. People kept drifting toward him. Not because he was trying to be interesting, but because he was interested. When someone spoke, he listened fully. No nodding to be polite. He absorbed. And when he did speak, his voice was calm, low, and slow. Every sentence felt like it mattered. That's presence. The contrast couldn't be clearer. While younger guys in the corner tried to dominate the conversation with stories and flexes, this man said very little and somehow held the room. It wasn't charisma. It wasn't style. It was stillness. It was energy control. It was being completely okay with himself. And here's the Stoic truth. Presence is built in silence, in restraint, in how well you manage your energy. A man who radiates presence doesn't need perfect words. His calm is the message. His control is the signal. Now, here's the moment of challenge for you. If you're over 40 and still trying to win people over with noise, you've missed the mark. The most respected older men don't perform their power. They embody it. So here's the question. Are you still acting, or are you simply being? Because the difference between the two is everything. But don't get too comfortable just yet. Trait number 5 is the one most men misunderstand completely. And it costs them quietly, especially in relationships. Because no matter how wise or grounded you are, if you miss this next signal, you risk being seen as outdated or irrelevant. Let's break that down next. Trait number 5. You stay curious, not certain. Here's something no one tells older men. Certainty is seductive, but curiosity is what keeps you alive. Most men, as they age, fall into the trap of thinking they've figured everything out. Politics, women, technology, philosophy, success. They speak in absolutes. They become inflexible, closed off, comfortable in what they already know. But what they don't realize is this. The moment a man stops learning, he starts dying. That's why this green flag trait is so rare and so powerful. A high-value older man doesn't hoard his knowledge like a relic. He evolves. He updates. He questions what he once believed. Not because he's insecure, but because he knows how much he doesn't know. As Seneca once wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." Let me show you what this looks like in the real world. A few months ago, I was in a quiet coffee shop downtown. Middle of the afternoon. At the table next to me, I noticed an older man, maybe late 60s, wearing thick-rimmed glasses and AirPods. He had an iPad open, watching a YouTube tutorial on how to use AI art tools. But here's the part that stuck with me. Sitting across from him was a teenage girl, his granddaughter, maybe. And instead of pretending to know everything, he asked her questions. He let her teach him. He smiled at his own confusion. He laughed when he made a mistake. And when he finally got it right, the pride in his eyes wasn't about mastering tech, it was about staying open. Staying young in spirit. That's what being a green flag looks like. Because, let's be honest, nobody wants to be around the man who shuts everything down with "back in my day." That man may have experience, but he's lost relevance. He's chosen ego over evolution. The green flag man is different. He reads books he disagrees with. He tries new hobbies, even if he's terrible at them. He listens more than he lectures. And the world responds, because humility is magnetic. Adaptability is attractive. Curiosity is timeless. So if you're the kind of man who still has questions, even after decades of answers, you're doing it right. Now, let's wrap this up. So, here's the truth, brother. Growing older is inevitable, but becoming a green flag? That's a choice. It's the choice to become a mentor instead of a bitter voice from the past. It's the choice to stay calm when the world goes to hell. It's the choice to stop performing and just be present. And finally, it's the choice to stay curious, even when your ego begs for certainty. You don't need to chase youth. You don't need to dress like you're 30 or pretend you have it all figured out. What you do need is to remain a student of life. Because the most attractive quality in an older man isn't money, muscles, or memories, it's meaning. And if that's the kind of man you're becoming, you're already ahead of 99%. Now tell me, of these 5 green flags, which one are you flying highest right now? Comment below. Let your voice be part of this brotherhood. And if this resonated, if you felt something shift in how you view aging, hit that like button, subscribe, and watch the next video waiting in the pinned comment. Your next evolution might be one click away. Philosophy, psychology, love, all in one place. New videos weekly on mindset, masculinity, and emotional mastery. Thanks for watching. Stay grounded.